sitting is extremely bad, not only for our health, but also for our future. It actually sabotages much of our future as far as disease is concerned, as far as our spinal health is concerned. But also, the main thing is, and it always comes back to this one issue, nutrition.
Today on CLevel, I have author and public speaker Dean Rosson.
So on today's episode of CLevel, I have Dean Rosson. So he's been in the health and wellness industry for quite some time. He's a Vistage speaker as well as an author. So Dean, welcome.
Thank you. Chris, it's good to be here. I've been actually following a lot of what you've been posting and a lot of your career lately. So thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to actually have you. I know we've been trying to get you, on the show and scheduled, and then when COVID hit, right? And so there was a lot of like maneuvering we had to do to make this happen. So I'm glad we're able to do this.
Yes.
So, Dean, I'm really big on people's backgrounds and how they got started. So give me a little bit of your background and your story for our audience.
In brief, what happened was with me personally, because I speak to executive groups, I even speak to very large companies, big organizations. Sometimes there's several thousand people in the audience. And so I jokingly call it channeling my inner Tony Robbins. But when I'm on stage, I really turn up the volume. But I'll try not to do that when it's just you and I. But here's what happened.
It's a Jersey, it's the Italian thing, right? We turn up the volume. We talk loud.
And plus, how do you give an Italian a speech impediment? You tie up his hands. So I'm going to be talking with my hands a lot. It'll go out of the frame. But what happened ultimately was I was always involved and interested in it. It was like my sweet spot. The whole idea of motivation, corporate business, how does business work? How does it thrive? Now, at the same time, I was becoming obese. I was an overweight kid who struggled with weight. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost, but overall, just to say, I thought I had bad genetics. So what happened ultimately was I got married, beautiful, Angela, who's just amazing. She was what we call the chronic skinny person. I was the overweight person who kept getting more overweight and becoming obese. So what happened was at about 33 years old, I discovered something which I share all over the world. And it's this: the consequences of carbs. So now I became, not only did I go from being obese to being a competitive bodybuilder, to being a fitness speaker, to literally having DVDs that I sell. And I have a website with all these videos. I have hundreds of videos on YouTube. But apart from that, my main goal is the whole concept of productivity. Even on my website, that's on every page, solving the productivity problem in your company. And so that's what I do now is I present it or package it as the productivity issue. The dilemma is our employees have low productivity, their clarity of thought is suffering, sometimes their energy level is low. Well, how do we turn that around? I found we can do that with health and nutrition. So that's a little bit of my background, and also a little bit of my passion is combining those two.
Interesting. So basically having a plan in place or something for fitness in the workplace to keep people more active, alert, is that something that you're doing?
Yeah, not only staying active, which is extremely important. Obviously the phrase these days is sitting is the new smoking. And so if we sit all day, literally everything begins to slow down, and it does create, and I've done a lot of studies on this. I even have a video out that I recently posted where it talks about that, where sitting is extremely bad, not only for our health, but also for our future. It actually sabotages much of our future as far as disease is concerned, as far as our spinal health is concerned. But also the main thing is, and it always comes back to this one issue, nutrition. So it's not just movement, it's nutrition. When I said I solved the issue, if you would, on the consequences of carbs, how carbs affect the body. And I studied this where it was 77 side effects of sugar. And many of those have to deal with not only disease such as cancer, diabetes, inflammation, but it's the way we think. In other words, it causes us to have clouded thinking. It causes us to literally slip into what I call the carb coma, which means we end up just getting lethargic. And we're supposed to be at the best during the day. So when I start to share this with executives and CEOs, whether it be through Vistage or through other organizations, they catch the vision, they see this, and they say, you've got to talk to my company, or we've got to bring you in order to speak to everybody. And it really is a very simple plan, though it's very thorough. So it comes across as step 1 through step 12, and then next steps are 3 steps, etc. But it's very simple, very simple.
I can even see, like, right now, like, especially now, like during COVID, and a lot of businesses have switched to virtual. So you have a lot more people that are in front of the camera, you know, on Zoom, and all day long, they're just at their desk. They're not active. They're not taking their breaks. And most importantly, you know, not eating healthy. And so a good, healthy diet and exercise, I could see can make people more alert in the workplace. Would you agree?
Exactly. That's exactly it, Chris.
Yeah. So that's cool. There's so much I want to cover with you. One of them, you know, is you have a book that is it's King of War. So the rise of King David. So I'm interested in learning a little bit more about that. Tell me about the book.
I'll tell you what, I've been fascinated with the character of David. And I didn't realize this, how long I've been, because a friend of mine actually sent me from Cleveland, Ohio, a good friend of mine named Joe Scalero. He's an Italian who works in concrete. Anyways, and that's not a joke, by the way. But anyway, so he actually sent me a cassette tape, an old cassette tape from 1977, where I was actually sharing a message. It was to about 100 people back in the day. And I'm an old guy, by the way. I'm actually a lot older than some people think. But anyway, so it was 1977, and it was after I graduated college, just to give you an idea. And I was sharing a message on David from 1977. So what happened is I was always fascinated, and it was in 2007, which is an also interesting number, where I all of a sudden got this extreme desire to write a screenplay for a motion picture. Now, I've been involved in film and motion picture over the years, and even produced some independent motion pictures. So I always think in visual terms. So I thought, okay, I'm not a writer. Just to be honest with you, I could actually give a seminar on what not to do when writing a book. I learned every technique, what not to do, by doing it. And so I actually decided I'm going to write a screenplay. I got an agent who literally got the treatment. And it's a long story. I'm going to go right to the point. She got the treatment, which is not the script, but a description of the script onto the desk of Ridley Scott, who directed Gladiator, and they were interested. And, you know, again, since I got to be careful with how many details I give, because there's still people out there who are still interested. And also you don't want to name drop too much. So all that to say, they wanted to sit on it or shelve it until they were ready. So I got some amazing advice from this agent. After writing for 2.5 years, she said, here's what's going to happen. If you sell the script, they're going to change it, and it's not going to be your story anymore. And they have all the rights in the world to do it.
Correct.
So she said, and if you want to own the story, if you want to own the character arc, if you want to make sure that your story is kept pure, she says, you've got to write a book. So I began to write a book. She says, this can't be just any book. It has to be a page turner that people can't put it down. And I'm over here.
You started with the screenplay and then went to a book?
Oh, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Which is not very common, actually.
No.
And she said, please do not adapt the screenplay into a book. She says, you have to get it out of your head that you're even going to make a movie. And you've got to make the best book you've ever written. I'm not a writer, though I love the whole idea of writing. I'm not a writer. So I needed to get very high quality professionals and surround myself with them. And let's just say it's moments away from being finally completed after a journey of 12 years, including screenplay, etc. And I will say it has been one of the greatest and yet heartbreaking adventures I've ever been on. In other words, I'm glad I didn't know what was waiting in front of me, because I would think, I don't know if I would actually do it, because it was difficult. However, It was more rewarding. Now that we're almost done, everybody who's even read a couple chapters, or I have a couple people who literally have read through the entire manuscript. And there's this one gentleman named James Witt. He loves Tom Clancy books. He reads them like repeatedly. He said he read through the manuscript 23 times. I said, wait, you what did you read 23 times? He said, the book, the entire book. I said, do you have time for that? He said, I couldn't put it down and I couldn't wait to get back to it because there's all these little hidden things throughout the whole book. And that's the way I write, where there's like, even when you're watching your Marvel movies, there's always things in the background that you have to pay close attention to. It might be a comic book reference. It might be a little tip of the hat to what's coming on the next movie. And I did that throughout the entire book, where there's little tiny clues. And it just explodes as the story progresses. So it was a lot of research that went into it as well.
So tell me about, because obviously, I'm in the movie business, right? And so you have a lot of these movies, especially faith-based films that are, there's biblical references, there's a story. So talk to me about how is this an accurate depiction of, is it a story, that's David's story right out of the Old Testament, right at, there, or is it, how much is it, I hate to say it, but Hollywood up, right? To add a little bit more to the story, because there are some people that, really enjoy these that are, literally the text is on the bottom of the screen. And, if you go back to the Old Testament, it's word for word, as opposed to, kind of having the writer or filmmaker's creative vision on it. So talk to me about that.
Very good. And as a filmmaker, there's several things that a filmmaker keeps in mind. And I studied filmmaking, as you probably nowhere near where you're at, but I studied it in script writing. And there's a phrase that you're probably very familiar with, and it's this: at the worst possible time, the worst possible thing has to happen. And that's in writing a movie, writing a play. And you always notice that, especially in the Dwayne Johnson books, where, so as I'm writing this, I realize something. It's exactly David's life. At the worst possible time, the worst possible thing happens. And so the thing is this: I guarantee everybody that it is tethered to every word of Scripture. In other words, it is as accurate as anybody can get. I even flew to Israel, went to all the locations and made sure I researched. I went to the Valley of Elah, where David killed Goliath. I researched who are the giants and where did they come from? What was their origins? What was their tribes? And was Goliath even did he just have a glandular problem? Was he just a really tall guy? Or was there something bigger going on? I went to the very ravine where David pulled the stones. So I wanted to make sure that when we describe the scene, there's not a single person that could say, wait a minute, that's not what happened. So I even have, just for the record, I have archaeologists who live in Israel who are advisors on the book, and they go through it, and they're always at my, I text them, I reach out to them on a regular basis, and especially there was sometimes where it was 3-4 times a day as I'm writing, and they would make sure that they're answering questions, even down to the difference between the iron versus bronze. And so it is completely accurate, but there's a lot of scenes for anybody who's ever read 1 Samuel, which I recommend you do, and 2 Samuel, which is the story of David. There's a lot of pieces missing. But when you're writing a book and a screenplay, you've got to bridge those pieces. So I have to say it's a fiction, nonfiction. In other words, all the dialogue is directly lifted word for word. I had no business changing that. Right. And I had no business changing the theme and or the direction or the way the scene unfolded. But I also went to other people like Flavius Josephus, who is a first century historian. And of course, he just goes by Josephus. And he wrote some specific things that are mind blowing. And if we had time, Chris, I would share with you what he had to say right there about the giants, about David, about the scene. It is mind blowing. So when I say that this is more accurate than most books, and I don't want to put any books down, but I promise that an archaeologist, a rabbi, a pastor, anybody who's ever been to Israel or has studied David would be able to read this book and a casual reader too, and your family and my family, and everybody would have to say, this is not only realistic, but it's plausible, and this is exactly what happened.
Interesting.
It's a lofty undertaking to say, wow. In other words, I have to have a rabbi and a pastor and an archaeologist, a historian, all agree this is a good piece of work.
Well, I think that's important for, especially, that it's fact, right? The book is already written, right? And so you've got a lot of people that can look at your piece and say how accurate it is, because you've already have something that's already written in black and white that everybody can reference back to. And so I commend you for having the research done and having a lot of people, read through it and actually hold you accountable, right, to the story. And I think that's important in any adaptation of a book, or most importantly, something that has been around for a very, very long time.
Which means everybody who's read it has their image of what had happened. So that's a very tenuous thing to enter into. I even had this one editor who I was interviewing who was going to edit some of the work. He said, in all due respect, you are setting yourself up.
Yeah.
He goes, people are going to love you and hate you all at the same time. And you're going to be like a politician and being on CNN, and they're just going to beat you up. Yeah. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm a big boy. I could take that. However, I could honestly say that I had just under 100 people proofread the entire thing. And that's just your average, everyday person. Then I had the archaeologists, the rabbis, the pastors, the scholars, the historians. Then they read it with a critical eye. And so I could guarantee and promise that those who read it would actually go on this amazing journey, and without realizing it, learn so much history and what actually happened back then. Yeah, 3,000 years ago.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what the results are going to be for you on getting this actually even made as a movie. It sounds very intriguing. So I wanted to kind of switch gears just a little bit and talk about, because we get a lot of entrepreneurs, we get a lot of business owners and leaders and people that watch our show, and we get a lot of speakers. We get a lot of business coaches that watch, and with COVID happening, and some of that, things, it's getting a little bit difficult for speakers to get out, and you have been, a nationally award-winning speaker. So talk to me about how you've been, working now during COVID as a speaker.
Excellent. I had actually right away, the first Zoom meeting took place the day after the shutdown. So in other words, I was at the airport getting ready to fly out to another state, and all of a sudden I get a phone call as I'm in the airport, and the gentleman said, where are you? I said, I'm getting ready to board. He said, don't do it. We went to Zoom. We're meeting tomorrow in the morning. So the first thing that I would say, though, to anybody who is interested in being not only a public speaker, a trainer, a coach, you have to learn your technology. Technology is the name of the game. That is where it's at, especially now, where we have the ability. Even now, you and I have been doing everything we could to connect. And here we are connecting right now with the Zoom call. And so I want to just recommend very strongly that every single person learn their technology, but then also let people know what you do. I just recently was on a website. There was somebody who's a public speaker. He really is excited about getting involved in speaking and training and coaching. And I got on his website. There wasn't a single video. It was all words. And he asked if he could also meet. So I, in order to do it correctly, I wanted to make sure I did some research on what's his story, but also what is actually stopping him. And one of the things I tell every speaker, everybody, even if they do it casually, is you've got to have video of you speaking. And it could even be something that you set up. Get a bunch of friends, make sure it's a very corporate looking setting. You don't want to have it, in your kitchen. Right. But you want to make sure that it's showing your skills.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that's the thing. A lot of speakers, that's how you guys are making money. You're up on stage, you're in front of people. People are seeing you, right?
Right.
If you're not doing that actively now, right, because of COVID, video is the only way that people can constantly see you. I mean, I know a lot of speakers that have great blogs and they write blogs, but why not turn all those blogs into video content?
Right.
Video content is really what is going to keep your brand up, keep you in front of an audience, and keep you working, because somebody is going to see that video of whatever topic you cover, whatever you speak on, and say, hey, you know what? I want to hire you on our next company Zoom call, right, to speak to my staff, to my employees, but it was all because of that video.
Exactly. Now, here's something else. Now, what's the name of your film production company again?
I have a film production company. It's 850 Entertainment. That's where we do,
Right.
Actual narratives and movies and TV shows. And then the agency, we do a lot of content for speakers and CEOs.
That's exactly it.
And stuff like that.
That's why for everybody who's watching, I strongly recommend, and Chris did not know I was going to give him a commercial. There's people like Chris right now who are there waiting for your call. And they know exactly how to make you look good. And so I was fortunate. I'm in film production studio, so I know what it's supposed to look like. So I have all the cameras and the editing equipment. So I just needed a couple people who really had good equipment or knew how to run my equipment. And so I just said, okay, 3, 4 cameras, 2 cameras, whatever it happened to be, even just 1 camera, and you film it several times. Either way, Chris, if you called Chris, I promise you, he will be able to put together all the content you need for the most awesome website. And I've had people call me all the time and say, we're looking at speakers, and there's 3 or 4 that we really have our eyes on. You're one of them. Okay, why should we choose you? I said, well, go to my website. Okay, I want you to click on this video because I would, if it was somebody different, I would have said, click on the 3rd video. But since it was this other individual, I said, click on the 2nd or 1st video, because this more represents the similar style of what your event is going to look like. And it was because I had video, because I had it well produced, simple graphics. It doesn't have to be overly complex. If you want it complex and you have a budget, trust me, we could do that for you too. Right, Chris? But overall, it's just get some video out there. So yeah, honestly, no one's going to read your website. Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
No one's going to read they might read through the first couple of sentences, but they're looking for a video. They might even look for a little audio track to hear how you present it. And there's a lot of techniques.
Audio. People discount podcasts. Like, why? Like, business podcasts are great. No matter what industry you're in, having a really good business podcast with good content and great guests, that's gonna keep you out there, and don't discount having a podcast. I mean, what we do, the video is most powerful. Video, in my opinion, is king. I mean, because you're hitting the visual, you're hitting the audio, and if done right, you get it transcribed, and you also have your blog there too. And these are things that I encourage every speaker to do, is get that out there. And like you mentioned, I mean, it could be professionally produced, we recommend, that, or, just getting that content out there. A lot of times people just hire us for the accountability. It's having a producer that holds you accountable to having your content out there consistently, because you need to get your message out there. You need to keep pushing content out there over time. Over time, a lot of pieces of content. You brought up the fact that, hey, let me show you this video. Let me show you this video. Let me show you this video, depending on who you're speaking to. Because when you're speaking on a topic, it might be right for this industry. Or this video might be right for that industry. And directing people to video content gives them a full essence of who you are as a speaker and what they can expect when they hire you.
Exactly. See, that's one of the reasons why I'm also, believe it or not, I've already been talking to Chris with a K about producing another video from you of one of my events. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's going to happen soon. Hey, can I give advice to the speakers out there? It's a 10-second word of advice.
Actually, yeah, we're actually coming right up on time, and so we'll wrap it with this, because I would love for you to speak to those speakers out there and giving them that gold advice. So go ahead.
Okay, no, I only plagiarized from the best. So here it is. This is from Tony Robbins. Now, for every speaker out there that's up and coming, if you're new or you have a vision to be a speaker, this is advice that he gave. And here it is. Take notes if you have to. He said this: folks, you are not an educator. You are an entertainer who educates. In other words, if you want to be an educator, get a job in the public school system. But if you want to be on stage, if you want to be in front of a crowd that will applaud when you're introduced and applaud when you're done, realize you are an entertainer who educates. So act like an entertainer. Feel the entertainment industry of what you are doing and stand out there and make sure you have your laugh lines, make sure you deliver. But don't just be an educator, because you're going to have a very small audience until you have no audience.
I absolutely love that. So be an entertainer that educates, and that is how you're going to be able to keep an engaged audience and people to keep tuning in for all the content that you keep pushing out. That is really good. Dean, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I had a blast. I hope everybody's watching had some fun as well. Thank you very much, Chris.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into the episode. If you guys enjoyed it, show some love, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. Also, make sure you check out our exclusive CLevel group on Facebook.